My sister got me a toothbrush holder. I went from having a toothbrush holder with 4 prongs in it to 3. And going into the bathroom every day to see the 4-person toothbrush holder was devastating. Like, that was the life I thought I was going to have. My sister quietly changed it out for me to a gold 3-person toothbrush holder. And it was at that moment, as cheesy as it sounds, that I was like, oh, this is my new life. I can have this.
Welcome to The Details with Allison Kahler, a space for real divorce stories and grounded conversations with experts, helping you find clarity and courage as you step into a future that may look different than you expected and better than you thought possible. My guest today is Olivia Howell. Olivia is the CEO of Fresh Starts Registry, the world's first divorce registry. It's also a leading divorce support network with over 150 divorce professionals. Today, Olivia and I talk about her divorce story, what she's learned about emotional abuse and coercive control, the most common and unique items she sees on divorce registries, and what it means to have a fresh start. Let's get into my conversation with Olivia. Welcome to The Details, Olivia.
Hi, Allison.
So happy to have you here. Olivia is the CEO and founder of Fresh Starts Registry, among many other things that we'll dive into today. But I wanted to start by asking, what does a fresh start mean to you?
I love this question. A fresh start is really taking everything that you've learned and moving ahead on your journey, looking forward, right? So you're not looking in the past. You didn't make any mistakes. You're not healing in the traditional sense. You are taking the lessons and applying them to what you can use moving forward. And we always like to kind of have people envision, like, you're putting on your hiking boots, you're getting your snacks, right? And you're kind of going down that path. And it's a really beautiful moment because I think it's hard for some people. Fresh starts are not always going to be easy, right? We hear the word fresh and we think, oh, it's going to be clean. Nope, it's messy, right? Fresh starts can come from trauma and they can come from death and they can come from destruction. But it's really about that moment where you take the lessons and you apply them to your future and you look ahead and you're not looking back. And so if you look at a lot of the messaging that we have, it's not angry. It's not bitter. It's not about what somebody did to you necessarily. It's about what you can learn about yourself and that identity shift as you move forward.
Yeah. I love that concept of hiking as an analogy or a metaphor. I live in Santa Monica and I go hiking a lot, and hikes can be brutal. They can be uphill and you can not see where you're going if you're doing it for the first time, and it can be really hard work. But I think a lot of times for me, it's just like taking that first next step and then the next step that can be really hard. You don't have to know exactly where the trail is going to lead you.
No, and we always say, like, the most powerful moment is actually that first step.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that you decided to do that and you get to decide how you move forward. I always kind of tell this story that our grandmother, who is in our book a lot, she was like our third musketeer. She had bought a house after her own divorce. She bought a house that had lots of land, but it was not taken care of for a long time. So she wanted to create a path that she could walk, and she was a big gardening person. And she took a roll of red yarn and she literally threw it into the woods. And wherever that yarn went, she created the path there. And she just kept going and throwing the yarn. And she really did. She created a path. And that's how I always like to look at, like, that journey is like, you're just going to throw that yarn and see where it takes you and follow that. But whatever your journey is, it's your journey and it's not going to be wrong.
Amazing. What a beautiful visual. I love that.
Yeah.
So your Fresh Starts Registry came out of your own divorce experience. So tell us a little bit about your divorce story.
Well, my divorce story starts, I would say, back actually in the 1960s when my parents were born, because we come from a family of divorce. So our parents are divorced. My parents got divorced when I was 10, and all of our grandparents were divorced.
Wow.
So we came from a family where divorce was super normal. We had many grandparents and cousins and step families. And then I got married young, like you did, Allison. I was 24 when I met my ex, and then I got married at about 26, had my first son at 29 or 30. And then by my mid 30s, I had 2 kids. We had a nice ranch house. He was an engineer. I owned my own company. And the marriage did not work for multiple reasons. There was a lot of emotional abuse. I didn't realize it at the time. And coercive control. Again, didn't realize it until later, but it was not a happy life. I will say that. And the marriage ended, and we lived together. The marriage ended in April of 2019. And then we cohabitated, as many people do, until he could move out in August of 2019. And when he moved out, the house felt really ghost-like. It was like a ghost town, right? He had a whole music studio in the house that was empty. There was instruments taken off the walls. The couch is gone, right? And my kids were 2 and 5. They were really little at the time. And I remember thinking, like, I'm living in this place. I can't heal here, right? I'm sleeping on the sheets from my wedding registry. I have monogrammed towels. And so I thought, like, there's got to be a registry for this. Like, this is when I really need a registry. And I Googled it. Really, honestly, Allison, thinking that there was a registry. I did not get into this to build a registry. And there wasn't. There was just articles from major outlets and writers who I've since become friends with that said, like, why is there not a registry for divorce? And I called my sister, who at the time, this was pre-pandemic. I was running my marketing agency. She was on the road. She worked as a tech person for big events like BlizzCon and pharmaceutical companies. So she was on the road a lot. And I called her and I said, I think we should build this thing. And she was like, that's lovely. Like, write it down. Like, we hadn't really worked together ever at that point. She also had just gotten engaged to her longtime partner. They were together for 10 years. So we were kind of living these weirdly opposite parallel lives. And then, of course, quarantine happened, and she ended up pushing her wedding because she was supposed to get married May 2020. And she's the middle child. It was a big deal. She was going to get her big wedding, and then pushed the wedding so many times that he decided he didn't love her anymore. And so she had the opposite experience as me. She left her apartment with nothing except our grandmother's dishes. And my dad and brother picked her up, brought her back to Long Island, where we're from, and she moved into a beautiful little apartment. But she had nothing. Like, no dishes, no silverware. You can see where the story is going. Yeah. And she called me and she said, remember that idea you had? And I said, I told you. And so we literally sat down she bought herself a new table. We sat there August of 2021 and we built Fresh Starts from the ground up. And for me, it was really, really important to have a one-stop shop for the items you need to rebuild again and the experts that you needed. Because as I was going through my divorce, and I would say my divorce was, like, in the big picture, pretty average and moderate. There was, it was traumatizing. It wasn't fun, but we ended up using mediation. I had the financial support. I had the family support, and I was still depressed as anything, constant stomach aches, felt horrible. And I was like, how the hell do other people get through this if they don't have a dad who's a lawyer, right? Like, what? Like, how do they get through this? So we made this really important commitment in the beginning, this vow to the company and to ourselves, that we never wanted someone to go through divorce alone ever again. And we really mean that. And so everything we have done since then is in service of that message, right? Of, like, what can we do to support you? We are just aggressively kind people. I think it comes from a childhood of trauma. And we really want people to know, like, you are allowed to seek joy. You don't have to do this alone, and we will help you get the support that you need. And we believe in these professionals that we have on the platform, and we support them too. So it was a big undertaking. We had no idea what we were doing. The company has had many flops and fails over the last 5 years, but we knew that if we could get to 5 years, that we would be on this huge movement, and we are, and we're very proud of that. But it's been really a wild journey to infiltrate the world of divorce and decide to kind of change the narrative from the inside out. And there's been a lot that we learned along the way.
Such a journey, and so many follow-up questions that I have here. I want to start with this concept of, like, it's not just about stuff. Like, having gone through this myself, I remember the experience of moving into my new apartment, and things that I brought in from the marriage, but also things that I either didn't have because we split things up or stuff that I just wanted to have new stuff. And I'm not a super girly girl here, but like all of my furniture from my old place was various shades of gray and beige and brown and grayish, right? Like, and I bought all this pink stuff for my
pink. I was going to say, I could have called the color before you said it. Yeah.
You're wearing a beautiful pink blouse. It's pretty similar, but I bought the defining thing that I bought was a blush pink velvet chair from West Elm. And I tell people this all the time because it was like, I just wanted something that felt feminine and new. And even though like I said, I'm not like a girly girl and all that kind of stuff, it felt really important to me. So what do you think that is about? Like, again, it's not just about the stuff, but like, what is that feeling that we are trying to evoke when we go through that fresh start?
Well, there's a couple different things here. In regard to the pink, we actually wrote a whole piece in Forbes magazine about this.
Oh, really?
Our friend Amanda Lauren, who is a writer, because we saw this so many times. Women after divorce would literally get their pink back, right? They would have everything pink. And it was such a phenomenon that we approached our friend who writes for Forbes and we said, can you cover this? And so it was a really great piece. So you can go search for that. So I wasn't surprised. And I did the same thing, by the way. So in terms of that, there is, it's an interesting situation. There's a lot of women who were not, and I hate this term, but allowed, quote unquote, to decorate their spaces the way that they wanted or with any feminine touches, floral, pink, purple, red, anything like that. And when you go through a divorce, it does affect your sexuality, your femininity, who you are as a person, and your sense of whimsy, right? And a lot of women just want to get back to that beautiful, soft, feminine place. And pink is bold, right? Pink, it evokes a lot of feelings. So I'm not surprised. I love that. But I think the part about the registry and the stuff that people don't understand on a fundamental level is it's kind of two things. Number one, you are often left with half of your things after a divorce or less. There's a lot of women who leave because of DV or because of whatever. They don't have anything. They often downsize to smaller places. They don't have items that will fit. They don't have dishes or cups or anything that they really need. So from a logistical point of view, that does happen a lot. There's people who just don't have the things. The other thing we're seeing that I love to talk about is I'm a subconscious mind geek person because I studied hypnotherapy. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist, which I got a degree in because I love the subconscious work. Mm-hmm. There's something about picking items for yourself from a list, right, and adding them to a registry that actually helps you build confidence in a way that you never did before. Mm-hmm. For a lot of women, especially, I mean, you've talked about this, that the rise in gray divorce over 50 has been almost tripled in the last decade. They went from their parents' house to their husband's house, right? And they never got to pick out things for themselves. And so we have seen so many women build registries and say, like, I get to have this salt and pepper shaker, right? I get to pick out the rainbow colored utensils or whatever. Yeah. And it's so beautiful that they get to really learn who they are through picking the items that they want. Yeah. And then on the flip side, when you can buy somebody something from their registry and their house is full of those items, again, this is kind of the subconscious work. Allison, if you're walking around your house and you see like, oh my gosh, my best friend from college got me that mug from my registry. Every time you see that mug, it's going to spark a moment in you where you feel loved and confident. Mm-hmm. And we always like to say, when you can change the things around you, the things around you change. And that's really true. So it's not about the stuff, right? We've gotten a lot of heat and people say, I'm not going to give you a gift. I just got you a wedding gift, which also data shows that most divorces are 8 years, 10 years down the line. It's about supporting people. I always like to say the items on a registry are the physical manifestation of the support you can give someone, right? Mm. The idea of supporting somebody through a divorce is not new. We didn't invent this idea, right? There's always been the, sisterhood that will give you the shot of whiskey after your divorce or whatever, you know. But this is about really, really on a fundamental level, helping people rebuild their life again after making a brave decision. And that's the reframe that we're trying to really instill in people.
And you are providing so much of that support through what you're doing, as you said, with the expert network that you're building. You actually have a lot of consultations with these individuals to help match them with the right experts. And so I'm curious through these conversations and reflecting back on your own divorce experience. You mentioned emotional abuse, coercive control, some of these things that you might not have realized at the time.
Yeah.
What have you learned through having all of these conversations with people that are actively navigating divorce?
Well, I love this question. So, for those of you who don't know, I offer one-on-one free Zoom calls for anyone, men and women, who are considering divorce, navigating divorce, post-divorce. It doesn't say divorce anywhere in the invite. It's totally safe. Nothing's recorded. I always joke that I take notes, but nobody can read my handwriting, so you're fine. Everybody always loves that one. And then I talk to you, I hear what's going on, and then I will connect you. We have tons of free resources. We have 3 free books that we've written ourselves that we self-published. We give them away for free. And our experts, actually, many of them have free offerings and low cost, very, very affordable sessions through us. And then, yeah, I connect you directly to coaches and all of the good things. But what I have found, number one, is that after talking to hundreds of women, abuse is rampant. Unfortunately, it is everywhere. And I don't think people have any idea about the epidemic that's going on behind closed doors right now. I would say, Allison, of the 20 women I talk to a week, 18 of them are in some sort of an abusive situation. And this is financial, coercive control, emotional, sometimes physical, legal, a lot of addiction happening. And so I get a lot of women who come to me in tears because they don't know who else to talk to about this, right? And this surprises people, but I am often the first person that a lot of people tell that they want to get a divorce. And divorce is really, really confusing. You don't know how to get started. A lot of the education we do is just like the simple, language around it because nobody knows what that means. And I've also learned that a lot of women come to me because of the content I put out there. They didn't know that what they were living was not okay. And I didn't know what I was living was not okay. And I only figured that out because of online friends. And honestly, because of TikTok. Because other women started to speak up. And I was like, oh, that's my life. That's not. And then they were like, and this is abuse. And I was like, oh no. And so I wanted so badly to help other women see that's whatever it is, not okay. Yeah. And so there are women that come to me and say, you've changed my life. I didn't know that I was living in this situation and that this was not okay, or I was being used this way or whatever. And I will say, the average time between a woman considering divorce and actually verbalizing that she wants a divorce is about 2 years. Yeah. And now that we've been doing this for 5 years, I can say that's pretty true. There are women I've met with at the beginning of our journey here that are just coming back now, looking for the experts and for support. So, I am so passionate. I mean, I really want people to know, you are not alone in this for 1 second. What breaks most women into tears when I talk to them is when I say that to them. Because they've been holding everything together for so long and they're so scared. And for them to know, I see you and you're not alone. Honestly, Allison, I don't know if I would have been brave enough to have a call with me back then. And so I'm so proud of all of these women who come to me. And I really want them to know, we're going to get you through this and you're going to get through this. It's not going to be fun, but we are all here to support you.
Yeah. I wish this resource had existed when I was going through it. Similarly, I mean, what you said actually doesn't surprise me from my own personal experience. My contemplation journey was 2 to 3 years before our divorce was finalized. I didn't open up to friends and family about it. I've shared this on earlier episodes where I talk about my own divorce experience. But the first people I talked to were sort of loose people I know that were colleagues at work because it felt a bit safer because they didn't have a relationship with my ex. And so I think that fact that you're the first person really resonates with my own personal experience. I'm curious, what resources did you turn to when you were going through your own divorce experience?
So I am very grateful. Our dad's a lawyer, not a divorce lawyer, but he's a lawyer. So he did help me. He helped me find a divorce lawyer, which was great. But honestly, I was like you. I was young when I got divorced. I had two friends in California. One was a longtime family friend who was divorced, and I texted her in the middle of the night, and I was like, I think my marriage is over. And then another one was a longtime online friend who also, they're both a little bit older than me and became like big sisters to me through the process. Shout out to Dara and Jordan. And then other than that, nothing. I mean, I had my sister and that was it. Like, and then I used people around me. So I would ask my aunt, do you have a mortgage? I didn't even know I needed a mortgage lender, like to refinance my house. Love my mortgage lender. He became like a rock to me through it, but I didn't know what I needed. I had no idea. And I didn't realize the extent to which I was not okay mentally until probably halfway through the divorce process when I started the healing process. And I was like, wow, like I am really not an okay person at this point. And then I turned to friends who were healers, and I had a great therapist throughout this, and she's wonderful, but I didn't have any of this stuff. And so I wish that I'd had one place to go and find all the basic education, of like, what does this mean? And what's physical custody and what's joint custody? And I was so affected by waiting for the lawyer to call and reading the paperwork. And I mean, I just had a stomach ache for probably 2 years, right? Nonstop. Yeah. And so I don't think people understand the trauma that comes with divorce, because it's very hard to explain that you're at your lowest point and filled with shame and regret and resentment. And also you have to make these incredibly hard life decisions about the future of you and your family. So it's like this intersection of hell and hell, right? And so you're like, I'm falling apart. And it took me, I'm 7 years out and I just am feeling like myself again, and I think that's really hard for people to understand from an outsider's perspective.
Yeah, 8 years on the other side and feeling very similar. Yeah. So what are some of those things that you learned through TikTok or you're talking with people that you're like, oh, now I know these are these signs? Because this is something I'm learning a lot on the other end too. Yeah. I think a lot of us are familiar with what we might see around domestic abuse and domestic violence, but I've learned new terms like legal abuse and financial abuse. And so you mentioned some things like emotional abuse and coercive control. What are some of those signs for people that might be feeling like this feels shitty, but I'm not getting physically abused? What are those signs to look for?
Well, first of all, most abuse is not going to be physical abuse because that's almost too easy for people, right? And I used to wish, I'm like, could there be a sign that I could leave this, right? And I was mentally falling apart and had no idea what was happening, right? So I like to say anything can be weaponized. I'm going to write a book about this someday. Truly, you could give me any situation. I could think of how an abuser would weaponize it, right? Mm-hmm. Olives, they don't like the olives you bought them and they're mad at you and they don't talk to you for 3 days, right? Whatever it is. And so coercive control, manipulation, emotional abuse, what it comes down to is, do you feel safe in that world saying how you really feel or no? If you don't feel safe saying those things, then something else is at play there, right? So it could be something as simple as, let's go through the bills together and, what are you spending on? And also, just to note, it's not always what's being said, it's the tone of being what's said, right? What's being said, it's the silence around it, right? So that's why it's so hard to explain. I always like to say emotional abuse is tailored and nuanced exactly for you. So a great example is I've had a lifetime of eating disorders. My ex knew this. This was not news. And he would walk into the kitchen and he would go, "You're eating that," right? Or, "Oh, you're eating everything now." Every time I would do it a Whole30 afterwards. "Oh, you're eating everything now." Now, if I said that to a random person who didn't know me, they'd be like, "Okay, he said you're eating that. Who cares?" Right? I knew it was abusive, right? And little things like that. And so if you are in a situation that you don't feel like the person is saying it out of love or kindness or is trying to hurt you, they probably are trying to hurt you, right? Yeah. And they're using your own power against you. That's a great way I always like to explain it. Mm. And so, for example, I talk a lot about, there's a lot of sex abuse in marriages that people don't want to talk about. If you are in a marriage and you don't feel safe saying no to your partner, that's coercive control. If you say, "I'm not in the mood," and then they flip over and call you a name and then pout and leave the room, that's coercive control. They are controlling you with their emotions, right? And unfortunately, we've normalized this so much. I'm a big fan of Laura Danger, who you've had. And, her book talks a lot about this normalizing of it in sitcoms and in movies. The grumpiness that can often, become the anchor for the household. Well, don't go into the living room. Dad's sleeping. And if he wakes up, he's going to be super angry with us, right? Little things like that. If you feel like you're walking on eggshells, that's not okay, right? And you don't have to live like that. But the part I think that's the hardest for people to understand is that it is so tailored. And it can be a look, right? It can be somebody just looking you up and down and you going, oh, they're judging my body or whatever. I mean, my ex used to make up really stupid but cruel names for some of my clothing items because he was trying to be mean, right? And so he'd be like, oh, you're wearing that Drecky again? No, Drecky, like, whoa, okay. But like, I knew what he meant was like, you look like you're not taking care of yourself, essentially, right? And then there's also the other piece of this, which is a lot of the gaslighting and flipping things, right? So for example, I would say like, I'm going to go take a shower. Can you watch the kids? Then he would fall asleep, right? And then I wouldn't be able to take a shower. And then I'd sit on the couch and he'd go, oh, when was the last time you took a shower? Right? Like little things like that. That's abuse. And it's not okay. And when you're in a marriage or a relationship, it could be a parent, it could be a sibling, it could be a coworker, that this is happening a long time over and over. It starts to devalue your humanity. Yeah. And so I think this is ultimately a big part of what people don't understand about abuse, even experts, I'm going to say, is that you are so conditioned, often from childhood, which I was, to put up with it and shut up and walk on eggshells and to bring the be the peacemaker and to not bother anybody, that you're just conditioned to say, okay, I'm going to be treated this way, right? Or I'm going to do the thing that's the least provocative to cause issues. I was talking a lot about Belle Burden, Toxic Strangers, about the sandwich. Everybody was all upset about her sandwich, right? And it really bothered me. So for those of you who didn't read it, after her husband says he's leaving, which my husband did too, she made him a sandwich. And people who don't understand abuse don't understand this situation, which is that she was conditioned to keep the peace and her child was there and she did not want him being angry. She wanted him to be happy because she knew she was on her way to freedom. And so she didn't want to rock the boat. So she made him the sandwich. It's not because she was weak or because she was being manipulated. She was actually incredibly smart in that moment because she knew that if she said, no, make your own damn sandwich, then it might blow up her custody. It might blow up the financial stuff. She was being really smart. I am very open about the fact that after my ex and I decided to split up, we had sex again. And I knew that I had to, right, talk about coercive control because it was what was keeping people happy in the household. And I knew happy people were eventually going to leave. So I wanted to make sure that road kept going, right? Yeah. And I wanted to be safe. And unfortunately, for a lot of women, predominantly, they know they're so conditioned in keeping themselves safe because it's a survival instinct. So they might make the sandwich. They might sleep with their ex or soon to be ex, whatever it is, because that's how they know how to survive in that moment. And so it's really hard. And I get it. It's hard to understand, but that's why I always talk about it because I want to take a lot of that shame away and also help people understand, she wasn't making a sandwich because she was being like an idiot about the situation. She knew exactly what she was doing.
Well, and I think just to layer on top of that too, I think part of what makes divorce so hard when there's not such a clear cut and dry, if somebody is physically hitting you, nobody's going to question your decision for divorce. Right. But some of the examples that you just shared, if you try and pass those stories along to a therapist or a friend or a family, et cetera, that doesn't know the context behind the emotional dig, or to your point, that it's so normalized in society that these types of things happen in marriages, people can kind of look at you with a side eye, and it makes you question yourself and question your judgment. And so part of the reason I think that people stay in this phase of whether you want to call it contemplation, discernment, indecision, is it's just really hard to know, how do I actually trust my own instincts and intuition in this phase? Is this okay? Am I making this up in my mind? Like,
Yeah.
am I being too sensitive to a situation? So I think we, or just people in general going through this, can second guess themselves a lot through this process.
100%. And that's why I like to give so many examples, like
Yeah.
for all of this stuff. And every time I give a new example, right? Postpartum abuse, there's spiritual abuse, which a lot of people don't talk about. I experienced that. I had a partner that would make up dreams and then convince us that we needed to buy things that he saw in his dreams. So, there's
That's a new one. I haven't heard that before.
spiritual abuse. And there's also obviously spiritual abuse connected to the church and a lot of women with God being angry at them if they get divorced and things like that. There is financial abuse, obviously, which happens. There's so many women that don't have access to their bank accounts, to the money, to have all of that. There's just anything you can think of that could be weaponized against you, Even, when I like to tell people, somebody that you're with that is constantly threatening divorce or taking the kids, that's abusive. That's not okay. And so every time I post about these nuances, I get a slew of messages from people that are like, I didn't know that was abuse. And that's why I never call it abuse outright. I just say like, this is something you may not understand that's happening. Because if you had told me I was in an abusive relationship, I would have been like, are you kidding? Like I went to college. Like I was a Latin teacher. Like, of course I'm not in an abusive relationship. Like as if that matters. Right. But that's how we're so conditioned culturally, is to think like, only certain girls get in abusive relationships. Actually, a lot of girls get into an abusive relationship. Yeah. And it has nothing to do with your class or your education or how much money you make. Anybody. And there are, obviously, as we know, celebrities in abusive relationships. And the most important thing is that we have to talk about this because it's still not understood what emotional abuse is, because it's still so prevalent as such a normal part of marriage. And that's not marriage.
Yeah. And so when you have these consultations, I imagine a big part of this is just normalizing for these women, or saying, hey, what you're experiencing is not a healthy part of a marriage. In terms of the experts that you point people to, or where do you go from there when you see these things happening in these consultations?
Yeah, so we always like to say we help people build their hype team. That's what we call it over at Fresh Starts. And I like to see it's a multi-level hype team. So I always love to start with a divorce coach. Divorce coaches, for people that don't know, are kind of that in between the legal side and the emotional side. But it's a very broad platform of people. And so you can have divorce coaches. We have some that are just strategists, so they'll help you strategize, which is amazing. Some are more trained in high conflict or in the emotional abuse stuff. And that's why I like to talk to people, right? So I can say and I always introduce people to multiple divorce coaches so we're always trauma informed and we want them to be able to make a decision on their own. Mm-hmm. But we start there, and then we don't go right to the lawyer like most people think, right? We want you to meet with a financial expert. If you have a home, I always want women to talk to one of our real estate experts and one of our mortgage experts. Your spouse does not need to know this. Those are free consultations, but I want you to be educated, whatever you do. And I always like to tell women, whether you use these experts now or in a year from now or in 6 years from now, have them in your back pocket, because you never know when shit's going to hit the fan, and you want them to be there. And then we have lots of experts that are trained in nervous system. We have a nervous system clinician, somatic healer, and lots of amazing experts trained in abuse and in, high conflict divorce, talking to your ex, talking to the lawyer, explaining what's happening. And of course, we have mediators and lawyers too. But we wanted to make sure we cover a little bit of everything, right? And so we're open to all. And we also have some really, really different professionals. We have creative coaches. We have a lot of business and career coaches, because a lot of women need that as well, and men. But we like to kind of build your team. And what's cool is, because we are us and people get to know us, we've had women now come back 3 or 4 times for more experts. So they'll say, okay, now I need this, which was one of the intentions that we had when we built the company, but to actually see it working is really cool.
That's amazing. And I love the term hype team. It just brings a different kind of tone to all of it.
Yeah.
I want to get your perspective a little bit more on this role of a divorce coach. And also, I know a lot of your experts offer free consultations, but one thing I hear from people a lot is just like, oh, but it's so expensive and I don't want to spend, or they stay sort of trapped in a dynamic because of the cost or the expense that they think it's going to take. And so how do you help people as they're navigating that, especially if there might be real financial constraints or some financial control going on in their relationship?
So to answer the question about the divorce coach, I think it's really important to remember that every person on your hype team, every person in the divorce world has a different role. Your lawyer or mediator, whoever you end up using, is going to have a role, but their job is not necessarily to get into the nitty gritty with your finances or parenting plan or, retirement plan or things like that. There's other professionals that is their job to get into the nitty gritty about that. Divorce coaching is a newer industry and it really is changing the divorce world. I'm a huge fan of divorce coaches. We also have a divorce doula, which I love. And so with divorce coaches, it's no surprise that when you work with a lawyer, they're billing you by the time, which that's their job. And we love lawyers for it, but they're not your emotional support. And when you can work with a divorce coach, they will help you write the emails to your lawyer, write the emails to your ex, get everything in line with your questions, with every document you need. And it saves you time and then money with the lawyer. So it does actually save you a lot of money down the line. I will say too, it's always worth it to have a free call with an expert because you never know what their services are going to be. I would say most of our experts offer at least a one-off session that's very affordable, and then you can decide if you want to work with them or not. I always tell people, I'm very honest about the fact that there's a lot of coaches in this world. Not all of them are going to be there to support you, right? Which is why we do vet people and they do have to sign an ethos when they come on board for Fresh Starts. But my general kind of advice for people, and this goes for any coaches anywhere you ever hire, have the free call with them and then do a 1-hour paid session with them. And if you still feel like they can support you in what you need, then ask them about their packages and the longer term commitment. But you really have to make sure that you feel safe with them and that they're the right person that are aligned for that job.
Yeah. And one thing from my own personal experience, and I've seen this with others too, is first of all, there's a lot of hesitation of even just taking this first step. When you reach out to someone, it feels really scary because it's like, oh my gosh, I'm doing something about this potential divorce that might be coming my way. And so actually making that first call can feel like a really big hurdle. And then the second thing is there's so much of this, like, I just want it to be over and done with. I just want it to be easy. And so even though I'm a consultant by training, my job was to evaluate all the options, analyze things, pros and cons, like run the math, even I joke around that I interviewed more florists for my wedding than I did lawyers for my divorce, right? Because I just wanted to pick someone. I wanted it to be done. And I think it's both really hard and I want to acknowledge it, but it's also really important to find the right set of resources around you. And so I really applaud what you're doing of vetting these resources because it can feel really hard and scary to look up a long list of who are the divorce coaches in my area and find the right person for you.
Absolutely. And we are incredibly inclusive. We want everybody to feel welcome. That is part of the ethos that people have to sign when they sign on with us. We've let people go from the expert guide because we don't like what they're sharing on social media. It's not aligned with our commitment to keep women and children especially safe and secure. And then this is not the place for you. Sorry, right?
Yeah.
And so you're totally right, Allison. And I think previously, I would say in the past 20, 30 years, people would go on Facebook, right? And they would say, who's the best lawyer for this? I mean, I see it all the time. And the thing is, every divorce is different.
Right.
It's so different. There's not two divorces that are the same. You're going to need different things. You're going to need, we have an amazing couple of coaches who work with neurodivergent families during divorce, right? Every divorce is going to be different and you really have to feel safe with that person. That's really the bottom line. And if you don't feel safe with them, then you're not going to be able to tell them what you need. We have scripts for everything, right? So we have a totally free ebook I think it's called, and I say I think because we have too much going on, but 250 questions to ask divorce professionals before you hire them. And so we went through all the basic divorce professionals and there's questions and there's scripts for when you call them. I'm so deeply committed to helping people understand the educational side of this because of the way my brain works. So we have a book called How to Get Divorced as a Stay-at-Home Parent, which was like a really important resource that I wanted to put out there. It's the only one in the world out there like that. And when you go through it, there's a huge chapter on calling for financial aid and services. I literally give you how to say the legal terms and break it down and what to say on the phone. And what if the person's not nice to you on the phone? And, all of these things, because I need that. I don't even like to call the dentist. So, for me, I wanted to make sure, like, I see you. I see how hard this is to make these calls, and you're not alone in this, and like use these scripts. So I always like to tell people, all of our workshops are free on the website. We have so many free resources. It's there for you. And that is part of reclaiming who you are, is taking advantage of the support that's in your world.
Yeah, I love that, because divorce can feel like another language, and you need a translator for this. So those scripts are so helpful. Yeah. You've written a few books. You have a new book coming out next year called Divorce Happens. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about what you're trying to communicate and share through that book.
Yeah, thank you. I always say I'm more excited about this than having my kids, which I'm going to own up to. I'm sorry, I just am. And so it's my life. I've been writing since I was 5. And so this is actually the first piece ever that I've had published ever. I was in 6th grade, and it was a poem about divorce. So I've been writing about divorce for 30 years.
Full circle moment.
Full circle. By the way, I'm such a great content creator that I still have the poetry book. That was inadvertent, but yes, I still have it. Divorce Happens, a compassionate guide to starting fresh, is, I like to say, it's for the woman who was the person for everybody else her whole life. The eldest daughter, the middle daughter, the hardest worker, right? She was a perfectionist. She held it together, and then divorce happens, right? And maybe you got through your divorce. You strategized, you got through it, right? You interviewed all the people. You are not going to be the same person you were. The world is not going to be the same place. You're not going to be the same mom or woman or lover or whatever it is. How do you re-find yourself? How do you rewrite that story? And so we take you through everything from really like the inventory of who you are now, of what you want to carry forward, rewriting those scripts, releasing a lot of the stories that you had about yourself, feeling all of the emotions. I wrote a huge chapter about like all of the things that you can feel at one time and how confusing that is to literally still feel grief and resentment and love and passion and lust in one breath, right? All at one time. And then who are your people, right? Who are your new people? What experts do you need moving forward? And then how can you celebrate yourself, right? What are the new rituals? And we really wanted to address people who are married and not married, were married, not were, had kids. We have talking about pets. We have the whole gamut of types of life experiences. And then we do share some of our own stories, and then stories from people that, kind of like, different women we've talked to and things like that about different things that they've gone through divorce. But, we always like to say divorce happens, right? And then you start fresh. And this is really that. And then you start fresh part. But there was no book about this, right? Everything was so focused on getting through that divorce. It's almost like all the parenting books are about getting through pregnancy, and then there's nothing for like the toddler years. And so this really helps you find who you are again when you are at the start of that literal journey, right? And you're like, okay, it's dark. It's nighttime. I don't have, my boots are unlaced. I don't know who I am. I have to pee. I'm starving. And, and it's funny, and it's our voice, and we bring in a lot of pop culture things, so it's an easy read, but we want it to become like the best friend for people, that they really genuinely don't feel alone through this.
I love that. And it feels like something that can resonate with people. Like you said, you're 7 years post-divorce. I'm 8.
100%.
It's something where I think for people that haven't gone through this process before, it's like, okay, great. The papers are signed. You're all done. 100%. And I think there is this next chapter that's like, who am I on this other side? And I've done so much of that work myself through coaching, therapy, the Hoffman process, all of the things, right? But it's years on the other side of creating that identity shift. So what a great companion for people.
Thank you. Yeah. And it really is this, like you said, like people are like, great, you're done. And you're like, but I'm not the same person I was. So how can I see the world in the same way? And we also want this to be a place that whatever your next fresh start is, you can come back. We teach you how to build rituals and new rituals and have those moments. And it's about slowing down and taking the time for yourself. And it really is especially for the millennial Gen X women, right? Who were the people pleasers. And then now you have to take care of you. And there's a lot of shame that goes into that.
Yeah. Well, a few questions as we wrap up today.
Yeah.
One is, you and your sister have created so much. If you were to wave a magic wand and look to the future, what are you hoping to accomplish through all of these different resources you've created in the world? What's the impact you're trying to have in the world?
I always joke, but I want to make divorce boring. Divorce happens, move on. Right. But it's it's so much a part of life, right? 40% to 40 to 50% of first marriages, 63% of second marriages. It happens. If it doesn't happen to you, it's going to happen to your best friend or your sister or your brother, right? And I want to normalize divorce as so much it's just part of life. All right. And here's the support that you need. But from a bigger broader scale, we want to see much more divorce representation in media and television and films that is actual divorce representation, right? Not like Mrs. Doubtfire, which we love Mrs. Doubtfire, right? But when we were growing up, that was it. That was the movie about divorce that you had, right? Like that was it. And so, we do a lot of work really bringing divorce into the larger culture. And I would love to see a lot more of that happening. We have Divorce Guide magazine, which we launched this year because we can't sit still for a second, which is the only divorce magazine in America, shockingly. And, that it features our experts. It features all sorts of tips and tricks. And we're trying to get that into libraries across the country, which shockingly is really hard to do because people still don't want to support divorce, even though libraries are a really important place for people who are going through divorce. And so, we have that, and that's always free digital copy, and you can also buy the hard copy we have. And really I'm proud of the voice that I have established in this world as talking about all the things I talk about. And I'm just really excited to kind of, see that grow and help more people. I'm just incredibly passionate about making sure nobody feels alone and that they have the support that they need. And we're pretty much here 24/7. My sister lives in Scotland. She had a very happy ending. She ended up getting married to the love of her life. So she lives in Scotland. And, I just want people to know that we're here. Like they really don't have to do this by themselves.
Well, final question, because it's been on my mind since I knew you had a divorce registry. What is one of the most unique things you have seen on a divorce registry?
I love this question. So the top items that we see are not shocking, right? It's towels, dishes, cups, plates, sheets. We have a lot of people who register for kids' room things, journals, like nice stuff like that. Mm-hmm. The item I always recommend you put on your registry is underwear. Always get new underwear after a divorce. Yeah, always. But we have seen that, and this goes back to our color conversation, iridescent anything. People love iridescent utensils, gold and pink, right?
Yeah.
And then we've seen disco balls be added to registries, pirate flags. There's all sorts of great things. But you have such a joy out of it when somebody submits the registry because we get to see a little bit about them and the joy that they are bringing into their life. We had a registry, a friend of ours did a registry and we sent her new utensil holders for her counter. And she sent me a video. I was crying. And she said, for the last whatever years, I had the utensil holder from my marriage and it was burnt and gross. And every time I would look at it, I would think, oh, this is like my life, right? This is like a great illustration of it. And she was like, now I get to look at my counter and see this beautiful, it looks like I'm in Pottery Barn, I'm, and all these things. And I think that's the part people don't understand. It gives people a chance to reimagine their life in a new way. And that was my story. My sister got me a toothbrush holder. That was what New York Magazine loved the story of. And so the new toothbrush holder, I went from having a toothbrush holder with 4 prongs in it to 3. And going into the bathroom every day to see the 4-person toothbrush holder was devastating. That was the life I thought I was going to have. My sister quietly changed it out for me to a gold 3-person toothbrush holder. And it was at that moment, as cheesy as it sounds, that I was like, oh, this is my new life. This, I can have this. And so, it's not about the stuff. We need the stuff, but it's not about the stuff.
I love that. And what you were sharing with me before we started recording is that you have the opportunity to be a divorce fairy and help other people. So we'll put all the information in the show notes, but if you are interested in sparking that joy and helping people swap out those items, as you said, it's not just about the stuff, but the impact that had on you. Well, Olivia, it has been wonderful having you on The Details today. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the amazing work that you are doing in the space of divorce and everything you're doing to help people on the other side.
Thank you so much, Allison. Thanks for giving us the space and for all the encouragement and for sharing the stories to normalize divorce, because that's the most important thing.
Thanks so much. Thanks for listening to my conversation with Olivia. If you're new to The Details and you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to hit that follow or subscribe button to get more real divorce stories and expert insights like these. And for my loyal listeners, thank you so much for continuing to listen to the show. If you could take a minute to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, I would so appreciate it. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week on The Details.